All right. I see my other man in the background. Let's go to him. We are joined with Caleb Maupin. Caleb, how you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm good. Quite excited. A bit nervous about what's happening. We are on the brink of history, as they
Yeah.
say.
I'm I'm I am I'm excited because it's a political event. If that makes sense. It's like political events are like my Super Bowl. It's like something's happening that's political. Yes, we can, talk about it. We can be excited about it. I don't know how I feel about it. I know what I want, but my wants don't really factor into it. In fact, let me bring you in so we can have a conversation. We're joined with Caleb Maupin, speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. Caleb, your show. Please tell the audience where they can find you.
Oh,
Center
sure.
for Political Innovation. I know that part.
Yeah, my website, my organization is the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org. I'm also on YouTube. I'm on Rumble. I'm on Facebook. I'm doing stuff all the time, streaming, writing. I've got all kinds of books I've written. I'm an advocate of peace, democracy, and equality, building a better world.
Agreed. They called me a dreamer the other day. They was like, he's a dreamer. It's like, dude, I stand by that. I defend that. Doesn't always turn out well, but I stand by it. Give me your take on the negotiations. Let's use that as a stepping point to step into the conversation.
Things look very good. That's not to say that they couldn't go south very quickly. You never know. And, international relations are certainly sensitive. But as of now, Trump's plane has already departed for Anchorage. The talks are set to begin at 11 a.m. And that'll be local time over there. And yeah, it's going to be something. Now, there's already a second meeting that's been agreed upon, and Zelensky will be at that second meeting. Donald Trump has said his intention is to wrap this up and to end the war. Now, Trump says they'll know within the first few minutes if this meeting is going to be a success or not. But apparently, Wyckoff and his visit to Moscow, I mean, this is all kind of prearranged. This is just to kind of, officially, have them press the flesh and talk before the media. There's a whole entourage from Russia and from the United States that has gathered, shortage we've seen. But, they don't have enough hotels because this is, high tourist time in Alaska. And so, they've got, people staying in like stadium barracks kind of places and all of that. And there's a whole crowd of people here ready to watch it happen. And it's not just going to focus on Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine is going to be a topic, but because Zelensky's not there, they can't finalize anything related to Ukraine. They're going to talk about economic relations between America and Russia. And I know that Bering Sea tunnel passage connecting Russia to the United States via Alaska over the Bering Strait, that is apparently on the agenda. And the official who was key in setting it up setting up the meeting is also on hand. He's also a big advocate of that Bering Sea project. So that's going to be discussed. The Arctic is an important point. Obviously, the Arctic is full of natural resources, natural gas and minerals, and that's a point of discussion. I also think the fact that Alaska was picked is not accidental, because how did Alaska become part of the United States? Well, the United States bought it from Russia. And I think that what is going to happen is that Russia is going to buy the Donbass from Ukraine. That seems to, everything that I'm hearing indicates that's what the deal is going to be. The USA has frozen over $350 billion of Russian money in bank accounts around the world. And that basically that money, Russia already considers it to be gone. And they've made more money since then because of the oil price rise and things like that. They're doing okay. And that basically Russia considers that money to be gone. And that money will be unfrozen and given to Ukraine from Russia as a purchase of the Donbass. And the Donbass will it's already joined, but will be recognized as part of the Russian Federation by the world. and Ukraine will receive the $350 billion, and that'll be used for rebuilding. And the emphasis in rebuilding will be on connecting Russia and Ukraine economically in order to de-escalate hostilities, right? If there are joint ventures, if there's business operations taking place, then that will de-escalate things. Now, Russia has made clear that there are two demands for a ceasefire. They need Ukraine to agree immediately that they will not join NATO, and they also need the recognition of the territories. And that's been made clear, and that there's not going to be any ceasefire without that. After that, there are some other demands that are going to be made in order to solidify and sign a treaty and get things in the works. And I think those demands will be around economic development, will be around how many troops, what kind of military force will exist in Ukraine, et cetera. But it looks to me, look, I pity Donald Trump on some level because, I don't know what his intentions necessarily are, but he's going to have to try and sell this to the world as Russia didn't win. Russia won. That's what's going on here. Russia won this war by far. Their stated intent was to liberate the Donbas territories and protect the peoples of the Donbas region who've been subjected to 8 years of bombing and shelling by the Ukrainian U.S.-backed regime after the 2014 Euromaidan coup. They've done that. The Donbas is secured. And at this point, they also had said that their goal was to make sure Ukraine would not be a threat to them, that it wouldn't, join NATO, it wouldn't join the European Union, it wouldn't, establish a military buildup on their border. It's going to be a threat to them. That's going to happen. That's already agreed upon as well. So Russia won this war. And Donald Trump is going to be castigated for that. And he's going to have to try and explain that somehow Russia didn't win this war. And that's not my job. That's on Trump and his supporters if they want to do that. Russia won this war, and Russia should have won this war. Russia was right from the beginning. This war was imposed. Ukraine is not a sovereign country that Russia is attacking. Ukraine lost its sovereignty in 2014 when the United States violently overthrew the government. It's then turned into a base area through which the USA and the NATO countries have been antagonizing Russia and murdering the people in the Donbass. And Russia held off. They facilitated the Minsk Agreement and the Minsk Accords to try and prevent having to go in militarily. But the Minsk Agreement was ignored, so Russia moved in. And Russia has been victorious. And I have been to Russia. I have been to Crimea. I have met people from the Donetsk People's Republic. I've met people from Lugansk. I've talked directly with people who have lived this. And that Russia is absolutely right. And the peoples of the Donbass consider themselves to be Russian. They're very happy to be part of the Russian Federation. And, Russia won the war. Russia won the war. It's a matter of how many Ukrainians are going to keep dying and how many more Ukrainians are going to be sacrificed before the West admits that. And it looks like Trump is starting the process of de-escalating this and acknowledging what is the reality. Russia won.
Okay. A few points. You said a lot. Okay. I don't want to be able to nail this down. I agree with everything you said in the context of how this war started. Agreed. All of the propaganda, they've created oceans of lies in order to try to justify and hide their malevolence in starting this conflict. So on that, you have my full and complete agreement. Two, the other people who are part of the delegation, just so the audience will know, I think the Guardian has gotten this wrong, even though I'll show some of the Guardian's thing, because the Guardian's adding Pete Hegseth. Hegseth was not part of the delegation unless he's signed on to it late. But for the American delegation, you have President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Vincent, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. For the Russian delegation, you have Vladimir Putin, you have Defense Minister Andrei Bursilov, I believe I'm butchering that last name, but we're going to keep going. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Finance Minister Anton Siluanov. You have aide to President Yushakov, and you have President Special Envoy Kirill Dmitriev. He is the finance guy. You also have, let's see if I can find it. Where is it? You have, okay, I can't find it. I'll just show this. This is the Guardian showing pictures of these people just so, again, the audience can see who these people are. I want to put names to faces. Sergei Lavrov, rock star. It's actually one of my favorites. He's a fantastic diplomat. Yushikov. You have Bella. Caleb, if you know how to pronounce that last name, please do.
Go ahead.
Okay. Belushev, Buchtat, Dmitriev, and Siluanov. And of course, you know, the American delegation, Rubio, Vance, Witkoff, Vincent, and Hegseth is not there. I do not know why they added him to that. The other part to this that I am more curious about is, where did you hear that they're buying the Donbass? I've not heard that.
Well, again, this
And by the
is
way,
not,
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I haven't heard.
this is not confirmed, but among the experts that have been featured on RT and in broadcasts, there are a number of them that are saying that that is the rumor that they have heard, is that's and that Alaska was chosen for that reason, that Alaska was selected because the USA bought it from Russia, and it's symbolic of, you know, the idea of doing things. I mean, Donald Trump's a real estate guy. Let's not forget that, right? And that this is a real estate deal to resolve the war. And that is the prediction that was made by a number of important voices who've been featured in Russian media over the last couple of weeks. And so that leads me to believe that something like that is the deal that's on the table. Obviously, we will see what happens when the meeting begins. But from my understanding, based on what I'm hearing from the different experts, it will be a purchase. It'll be a financial deal that will resolve the war.
Forgive me for being a hard ass. Why on earth should the Russians buy the Donbass? And let me explain why. As you point out, A, the U.S. overthrew the government of Ukraine. B, the U.S. provoked a war by effectively building up a massive military on the border, not to mention murdering ethnic Russian Ukrainians, pretending as if they weren't even Ukrainians, which was effectively a civil war. And on top of that, in the creation of that war, because the gentleman that you had on the whistleblower, he has pointed out that there were U.S. people pushing Ukraine to launch attacks on the Donbass, meaning we were all through this conflict. They were not a sovereign nation at that point. They were provoking a war that they knew was going to take place. Going back to Joe Biden's CIA guy, the memo, where he points out that in 2008, by offering NATO membership to Ukraine and Georgia, that they were pushing and provoking a civil war that Russia would have to get involved in, even though it didn't want to. You got all of Europe making a wall of lies in order to kind of hide the reality of that they moved NATO all the way to the border of a country, something that we, under no circumstances, would accept. If Russia knocked over Mexico and started putting in military, special forces, CIA, all of that stuff, the United States would have obliterated Mexico and would not be paying Mexico after the obliteration. They had murdered or killed 100,000 Russians in a war that Russia didn't want, that was entirely provoked. As you point out, the people in the Donbass considered themselves Russians. They were being bombed. They voted to leave. Why should Russia have to buy the Donbass from Ukraine?
I agree with you. I mean, and if the world was just, obviously, I mean, this war never would have happened. And obviously, the idea that Russia should have to buy this, I mean, they shouldn't have to, obviously. I mean, it's an unjust situation. I think that Russia would want to agree to this in order to avoid the further conflict and avoid the cost of having to march further into Ukraine and continue to just obliterate the Ukrainians on the battlefield as they are. You know, and I think that would come at great cost to Russia and to Ukraine, and they are certainly willing and able to do it if they have to. But I think it would be in the interest of the world overall if they didn't have to. So, you know, they've already lost this money, money that is theirs that was stolen by the West, but they already consider it gone. So this money that's already lost, instead of just being returned to Russia, which would obviously be the fair thing, it'll be given to Ukraine as the purchase that ends the conflict. You know, and that's a deal that is agreeable to all parties, from my understanding. But we shall see. We shall see. There has not been an official announcement of what the deal will be. And also Zelensky will have to agree to it. Now, It's been revealed that Zelensky, they've already planned his departure from office, and that the NATO countries basically had a meeting, and they've already selected his replacement. I mean, he's done. The question is, does he leave the country in handcuffs? Does he leave the country, charged with corruption, or does he step down, and hand over power? But there's an ambassador that's already been selected as his replacement. And that's because Ukraine, again, is not a sovereign country. Ukraine is a colony. Zelensky was selected. The president before him, Poroshenko, was selected, and his successor is being selected. The whole Euromaidan coup was from, that was Victoria Nuland. That was from the West. Ukraine is not a sovereign country, and that the issue in this war is not the sovereignty of Ukraine. The issue in this war is the West trying to destroy Russia because it's a competitor on the oil markets and on the gas markets. And probably, I would say, the greatest victory that Russia had was not on the battlefield. It was internationally, because at the beginning of this war, Joe Biden wanted to force the entire international community to cut off Russia. And the international community said no. India said no. Saudi Arabia said no. Israel said no. The international community basically said to the United States, no, we're not going to give Russia the cold shoulder just because you provoked them to invade Ukraine. That's not going to happen. And when that didn't happen, at that point, Russia had already won. Now, their victory has come at great cost, but the fact that they couldn't be economically isolated the way that the West had hoped, at that point, Russia was going to win. It was just a matter of time. And I think, they knew Russia was going to win. They just wanted to cost Russia lots of lives and lots of money, and hopefully demoralize the population. That's been a lot of talk of that, with the drone strikes and other things, the horrendous murderous attack on the Crocus City concert hall that was basically announced by the Biden administration ahead of time. Oh, there's going to be an attack at a concert. Basically, just so they knew where it came from, right? Just to make clear that, there was no ambiguity. This was an attack delivered by Washington and Ukraine. They announced it ahead of time, and then they shot up the concert and killed all those teenagers that were there to watch a rock and roll band. They knew Russia was going to win this war, but they wanted it to come at great cost, and it's because Russia is an economic competitor. And they hoped that they could force the world to boycott Russia, and they weren't able to do that. It's very similar to what Brzezinski did with the Afghan trap. And, 1978, you had the Sour Revolution in Afghanistan that was forced, right? You had a neutral government in Afghanistan, and then, the USA put pressure on the government of Afghanistan, and so they started suppressing the pro-Soviet generals. The pro-Soviet generals took power, and then the USA, fomented an insurgency in Afghanistan in the 1980s, and the Soviet Union was forced to send its military in. And Brzezinski called it the Afghan trap. They had planned the whole thing, and then they used that to boycott the 1980 Olympics, to whip up hysteria against the Soviet Union around the world, and to demonize the Soviet Union. Their plan was to, quote, give the Soviet Union their Vietnam. And that's the playbook. And that's, what they were trying to do here. And the war in Afghanistan that went on for a decade weakened the Soviet Union. It was part of an overall process to hurt the morale of the Soviet people, etc. And that's what they hoped to do here. And it's no coincidence that Barack Hussein Obama studied at Columbia University under Zbigniew Brzezinski and had Zbigniew Brzezinski advising his presidential campaign in 2008. This is geostrategic methods, right? And that it's interesting because there's a lot of people who say this is a neocon thing. This is not the neocons. This is the Brzezinski kind of, geostrategic school of like long-term manipulations. Neocons are about regime change interventions. The neocons, that's a particular school of thought that moralizes things. Whereas Brzezinski and the other forces Brzezinski objected to the axis of evil speech because he said sometimes you might want to align with one of those governments to manipulate them against somebody else. And that if you make it a moral question of these are just evil regimes, you can't play the manipulative games that they like to play. Right. We need to be clear about who the neocons are. And we also need to be clear about who Brzezinski is, and that there are different factions among the deep state and the intelligence apparatus. And the neocons are one particular faction that absolutely hates Russia. No doubt about it. But it was Brzezinski and it was the geostrategic school that kind of engineered the crisis in Ukraine as part of a long-term game that they were playing.
This is more of a reason why you shouldn't give them squat. This is more of a reason.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, for God's sake, right? I do get it. I do get it. It's a compromise. This is kind of like a lawyer would say, hey, this is a deal in order to put this to bed. A, it shows that they lost, meaning the US and the Western powers lost. That plan to try to weaken Russia backfired. It did the opposite. Russia had, what, 150,000 men in their military when they went into Ukraine? What, they have like 1 million man military right now with 2 forces in reserve at full kit, and they're outproducing the West threefold. That is a failure on an epic level. And that is a failure on an epic level that is damaging to not just the credibility of the US or, for that matter, the European powers, but just from a military standpoint, that is a massive failure. Yes, they've been able to overextend Russia, but they failed in that capacity. It didn't do what they did in Afghanistan. It wasn't a Vietnam in the way that they were thinking that it was going to be. And it didn't damage the credibility of Russia around the rest of the world. It isolated Europe and the United States in their own foxhole. So to get it, right? It's the principle. It's the principle. And the principle on this one is you guys got 100,000 Russians killed, maybe 150,000 killed for a war that we never want, for a war that you provoked. You've steeped Russophobia all throughout your societies with this idea that you're trying to provoke a war later on. No, you should build Ukraine back up. Use the money that you have at your disposal. You build it. I mean, there's a principle behind it. The idea that Russia has to pay as if they've done something wrong in this process is outrageous to me. I get your point that it's a settlement. And in the context of a settlement, there's some things that you give, there's some things that you get. And Putin may be willing to say, I'm going to put this to bed because my job, as I've pointed to the audience, is chasing safety. I did this for the safety and security of Russia and for the long-term security of Russia. I do get it.
Yeah,
But
well,
God, man, principle matters.
yeah, I do want to show you. So, my organization, Center for Political Innovation, we're going to be in the streets today supporting the deal. And we have these posters. Thank you, Tulsi. Center for Political Innovation. We'll be in 9 different cities today in the streets with these posters. Thank you, Tulsi. We also have a poster of Trump and Putin shaking hands that says, "We support peace talks and the Ukraine war." And we're going to have a visible display of support because, the Ukrainians are out in full force. They flew a bunch of them to Alaska just to be there to, make noise. And I look at that crowd. I'm like, why are all those people there? They should be in Ukraine fighting, right? I mean, they're dragging all the grandpas off the street. What are you doing in Alaska, right? If you really want this war to keep going, why get over to Ukraine and fight? They're running out of people over there. Like, I mean, it's pretty crazy, but we're going to be in the streets and, thank you, Tulsi. Look, this wouldn't have happened. The only way Trump had the political safety to even talk about this, whether it happens or not, the only way he had any political safety was because Tulsi Gabbard revealed that Russiagate was a complete house, and she leaked document after document, and more stuff is trickling out. Did you see the latest, where they called it a team sport, framing Russia, I mean, that is completely absurd. I mean,
wait, real quick. You have to tell me, how do you know that Zelensky is going to be replaced? I'm sorry, I got onto a bit of a rant.
I just reported the Russian foreign security services revealed that a meeting took place where European leaders gathered, I believe, in Switzerland and selected his replacement. That's being reported.
You mean Zelensky? That reporting from I believe it was the FSB?
That a meeting took place and that they've already picked his replacement, and the individual, I don't remember his name, but he's an ambassador at this point, and he's going to be the replacement of Zelensky. And that's been reported this morning that there was already a meeting. The European leaders gathered and they said, all right, this guy's replacing Zelensky. I believe the meeting was in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But yeah, I see that's floating around. And I mean, the Russian security services, they tend to be right about these kind of things. They tend to be. The Russian security services, I mean, I will say they know what they're doing. You remember the infamous F the EU call remember that was during the Euromaidan thing. There was, they got Victoria Nuland was on the phone saying F the EU. They had the phone call. They leaked it for everybody to hear. They know what they're doing. When they come out with something like that, that's officially from them, I mean, they officially came forward and said this, that yeah, I think that's very, very reliable. You can count on that. If it was just some rumor that was floating around, different blogs or something, that'd be one thing. But this seems pretty reliable. And there's been calls for Zelensky to be ousted when he shut down the anti-corruption organization that the West set up. There were all these protests, which you're not allowed. How can you protest in the middle of a country that's at war? I mean, clearly you can't go out and protest in the middle of a country that's at war unless there's a lot of people in the government that are okay with you doing it. Zelensky. And the thing is, I wonder how much he's going to be the fall guy for the whole thing. Because he made himself look. He was flying to speak to joint sessions of Congress and putting on the tank and the costume, and he became the face of this. And so now that everything's fallen apart, he's going to have to be the fall guy to some degree or other. And how much do they let him get away with just kind of stepping out, or how much is it going to be, Zelensky's the guy that this all falls on his shoulders? We'll see.
That's interesting. I mean, because I don't know how Europe and the U.S. separates themselves from Zelensky on this. I don't know how they do that. I mean, for the last 3 years, Zelensky has been Winston Churchill. He's been, the guy fighting the quote unquote monster. Putin is Satan and Putin is the devil. And Zelensky was the guy who was apparently fighting and holding back the night. How on earth could they now turn around and say it was all him? Yeah. It was all him.
Well, I mean, it's like they themselves, the New York Times and other people reported extensively about all the corruption in Ukraine, and then they just forgot about it. And then it was send all your money to Ukraine, send every last nickel you got to Ukraine. They need you, right? And it's like, you just told us this is like one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And, we were all, anyone. I certainly didn't donate to Ukraine, but those who did, they were all lining the pockets of oligarchs. That money was being pilfered away, and that bought luxury apartments for Ukrainian oligarchs in New York City, and that bought yachts for Ukrainian oligarchs in the Mediterranean. This war is probably going to be remembered as one of the greatest money laundering operations in world history. The amount of money laundering, and there was that cryptocurrency scam that was revealed, and
$50 billion. They were trying to buy a bank.
Yeah,
France.
The sad thing about this is one thing about the liberal wars that is really bad, is that human beings are empathetic. We care about other people. If we hear about somebody and they're suffering, we want to help them. And that, the liberal warmongers are really good at manipulating those basic human feelings, of empathy and solidarity and wanting to help other people. And they manipulate that, like donate to Ukraine or save Darfur or the Uyghurs in China. And, they know what they're doing. And people realize they've been scammed. They realize they've been had, and then they become more cynical and hard-hearted. And that's a really, really negative aspect of that. The right wing war hawks, it was just, all these countries, they're all terrorists, kill the Arabs, whatever. That's obviously racist, and that's obviously bad, but you're not manipulating people's good side, right? And you're not taking the good side of people and manipulating it for evil. And people are then going to realize, look, we got scammed, and that side of people, the good, compassionate, empathetic side of people, is going to be lessened because of that, right? And that's what happens every time they do this. And I remember when I was in college, the Save Darfur thing, and you remember Coney 2012, you remember that whole thing, and that, and it was just, there's just so much of like, how can we manipulate people's good feelings? And it's a very cynical thing, and it leads to us becoming a more ruthless and selfish society overall, because people see they're being scammed. And so their result is people are going to be less willing to help other people in genuine situations.
I know, Caleb, but all wars require that, like babies in incubators in the Iraq war. What was that? Oh my God, they're killing babies in incubators. We have to do it. Saddam Hussein is a maniac. He's a monster, et cetera, et cetera. They use the same tactics. I know what you mean, right? But they use very similar tactics, even right wingers. Maybe they do it less so, I suppose. That's fair.
Yeah, well, Samantha Power is really the queen of this. Her whole career, she started out as a journalist who, built the case for U.S. military intervention in the former Yugoslavia, and then she ended up being the UN ambassador. And her whole career was just, how do we make propaganda to manipulate people to support military interventions? And Yeah, I mean, I've written about her. I've got a book of different articles I wrote about Samantha Power. It's called The Regime Change Industry. It's a compilation I put out recently. I mean, it's really unfortunate. And, I remember when I used to report from the United Nations, I remember one time there was a press conference that Samantha Power did. It was about Syria. And standing next to her, she had an Islamic woman in a headscarf and full hijab or whatever. And then she had some like kind of queer looking punk rock young man, with like piercings and all of that. And they just stood next to her. It was like the Muslim and the punk rock LGBT person on either side. They didn't say anything, but it was obviously a statement, right? She knew what she was doing, right?
So wrong.
I mean, it was like, here are my two poster children that I'm pandering to. On the one hand, Islamists, on the other hand, punk rock, LGBT, teenagers or whatever. And I remember seeing that, and it was, they didn't say anything. They were just standing there on either side of her, like her flank, on either side, and it was obvious what they were doing. And, one of the big disagreements I've noticed is that the Muslim Brotherhood was very key in the Arab Spring, right? And that's the wing of Islam, the kind of westernized Islam that, is funded by Turkey and Qatar. And they were very, very key in helping the United States destabilize the Middle East during the Arab Spring, bring down the Syrian Arab Republic, bring down, the government of Libya. And that it seems like Trump and his allies in the deep state, people like Tulsi Gabbard and others, they don't like the Muslim Brotherhood, and they want it declared a terrorist organization, etc. And it's because the Muslim Brotherhood, to their credit, I mean, despite all the evil things they've done and all that, they are anti-Israel because they're Muslims, and they just don't agree with Israel. And it seems that is one of the primary disagreements within the American ruling class: is should we use the Muslim Brotherhood as a proxy, as an ally, or because they oppose Israel, should we just throw them under the bus and call them terrorists? And I think the Trump camp want to throw them under the bus and call them terrorists. And that is an interesting turn. And we'll see. They have not yet been declared a designated terrorist organization, but I see a lot of the people in the Trump camp trying to get them designated as such. I will say, though, I mean, a couple weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had a shooting here in New York City, and a Muslim police officer from Bangladesh gave his life to stop the mass shooting. This guy went into the building in New York City, and he was a former football player. He was targeting the NFL, and he had his AR-15, and he shot up the place. And it was a Bangladeshi Muslim police officer who ended up giving his life while the shooting was happening. It was all over social media. Laura Loomer and all these social media people were saying it was the pro-Palestine people that did it. It was a Palestinian terrorist attack. It was not. It had absolutely nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. And it ended up being a Muslim who gave his life to stop it. Pro-Palestine Muslim police officer in New York City. And yet there was no apology afterwards. All these people were blaming it on Muslims, blaming it on pro-Palestine people. No apology whatsoever. And my understanding is there were a couple people near the shooting. They were just in the area. New York City is very densely populated. And this was on 51st Street. And there were a couple people near the area who were wearing pro-Palestine shirts that were arrested by the NYPD. Well, there's a shooting happening and you're wearing a pro-Palestine shirt. You might have something to do with it. And we're dragged to jail. And then their faces were all over social media, and that was the case they were trying to make, that it had something to do with Palestine. These people were arrested near the scene. And like that is particularly outrageous. And it's particularly disturbing to see the way that these things are playing out. But then you look at Mamdani and his campaign, and how Mamdani is likely to be the next mayor of New York City. And he's a Muslim born in Uganda, and calls himself a socialist. And we're in some very, very interesting times, to say the least. I know a lot of people in New York City that agree with Mamdani about Palestine, and they agree with his criticism of Israel and such, but they also know that his policies will just demolish small businesses in New York City. I mean, I know a restaurant owner who said that if he implements his $20 an hour minimum wage, they're going to shut down. I mean, the restaurant's gone. I know somebody who owns a building and says that if he implements his rent freeze, the big real estate giants will stay in power, but I will lose my building. And that, the policies that Mamdani is implementing, they're not really policies that are going to benefit the little guy They're policies that will benefit the big real estate monopolies by clearing out the small business owner. You know, and the main problem with real estate in New York City is speculation, is that no one has to live in these buildings to make money off of them. You just wait for the market to flip, right? You just wait for the market to go up. Real estate is just a new gambling casino like the stock market. And there's, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of empty housing units in New York City. You know, and these landlords, the big real estate monopolies, are making money off of housing without anyone actually living in the housing. They just, you know, buy the properties and flip them for profit. And you have small, you know, people that own maybe one building that is their little piece of property, and you know, they are struggling to stay afloat. You know, as the real estate property values keep going up, et cetera. And then, you know, if you freeze the rent, you know, those folks are going to lose their building, and then their building's then going to be bought by a real estate giant that will then, you know, have it be empty and make money off of it without anybody living there. And it's going to make the problem of housing and rising rent in New York City worse. I mean, it's you know, Mamdani's policies on a local level. I mean, some of them, the free buses, that's a good thing, right? What's wrong with free buses? That's good.
Caleb,
but
you know, to interrupt you, I would love for you to come back next week so we can have this conversation, because I think that's a fascinating conversation. I'm not trying to interrupt. There's a guest coming right behind you.
All right, cool.
Please tell the audience where you're going to be selling the agreement if this agreement takes place. And look, it's not, and by the way, just so it sounds like I'm being very brutal. Maybe I'm in my feelings about it because it's a principle thing. But look, if Putin turns around and says, yes, I'm accepting this, I could accept that. It ends the war. So I don't want you to think that I'm against you on this, right? Please tell the audience where you're going to be, and please tell the audience where you're going to be with your.
Well, I'm on YouTube all the time. Caleb Maupin, you know, that's my YouTube channel. My organization is called the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org. I've written a number of books. I stream on YouTube as much as I possibly can. So, I'm on Rumble as well. So,
showing with not protests, with your advocation of the.
Well, yeah, we're going to be in the streets of New York City and in nine different cities, 8 other cities today. So it's going to be a good demonstration. And, you know, we're not announcing the locations ahead of time. We don't want the Ukrainians to show up and act a fool, which happens. You know, we had a workshop in Minneapolis. There were a bunch of Ukrainians outside screaming about me and stuff. So,
really?
Oh, yeah. I'll send you the video. It's pretty wild. So, yeah. But we'll be out in the streets. Well, thanks for having me on. I know you and I are both going to be watching the meeting in Alaska very closely. So,
yes,
great work that you do here on this channel, Jamarl. You're a real one, as they say. So, dare to struggle, dare to win.
Thank you, man. I really want you to come back next week, because that is a fascinating conversation about the Mamdani thing.
Will do. All right. See you next week. Thanks.
Thank you, man. You be safe, okay? Have a good one.